Hello and welcome to the Warrior Supercast podcast from Winton Woods City School District. This is the program where you can find out what's going on in the school district and we can highlight superstars of the district. Today, we have with us some folks that are going to tell us about the new things happening. We can all see construction happening and buildings going up, but we're wondering, what's going into these? How are they being designed so that they're going to be new and exciting and help education and schooling and the things the kids are doing every day? So thank you so much for coming in. I want to introduce, we have Mark Doctor, Director of Child Nutrition. Mm-hmm. We have Tanya Bray, Director of Student Services. We have Steve Denny, Executive Director of Business Affairs, and we have Dr. Tamara Ragland, Director of Teaching and Learning for grades 7 through 12. I appreciate you all coming in so we can talk about this.
Thank you for having us.
So Steve, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Can you give us an overview of what we can expect on the timeline here for the campuses?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're excited that the buildings are on schedule, and they are due to open or turn over possession of the buildings to the district on February 4th, 2021.
Okay, so we have a date.
Both buildings, yeah, we have a date. It's in the contract.
That's exciting.
So, right.
And construction that's happening on schedule is exciting in itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing to be sneezed at. Dr. Ragland, how are these new facilities going to enhance student learning?
So we want classrooms that are designed for active learning rather than passive learning. Environments that are going to affect retention, attention, motivation, learning, and academic achievement.
That's really important to note, because when we think about a school building, there's something that we have in our minds. We sat in school buildings, mostly school buildings that were designed long before we were born, and they were designed so that we could sit and face forward. And that's not necessarily how learning always happens, especially in a project-based environment where they're working together. So that's exciting. This building will be for that.
So what you're describing was a teacher-centered environment. And so we're moving away from a teacher-centered environment to a student-centered environment that is also supporting high-performance learning.
That's fantastic, because you've been doing that, but you've been doing it in buildings that weren't designed for that.
Correct.
So this will be an exciting chance to have facilities made for that sort of learning. Tanya, how are these new facilities going to support students that come to you and have disabilities?
Right. So I guess the wonderful thing about the buildings is that they're building the buildings from the inside out. And so with keeping that in mind, along with Dr. Ragland stated, is that our students with disabilities have the advantage. So there are small pods that are confidential rooms that they can be pulled out into resource where they can focus on their particular needs, and then they can push into the bigger environment where it's more collaborative, where they're able to participate in those project-based learnings and designs. So it's very unique in that aspect, along with having other things in the classrooms that hone in on their sensory needs, and just their overall needs in particular. We were very, very intentional where we place these classrooms so that all students will have access to the major classroom and availability to learning.
I can't wait to see this, because I can already see it in many classroom buildings. It's difficult to be able to pull out of that big group, and so many kids need the opportunity to work in a smaller group, just even sometimes,
Yes.
or just be able to step out sometimes and reprocess. And most buildings, school buildings, are not set up to allow for those spaces.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, it allows that collaborative time and allows that individualized focus, and also for small group.
And students who know those spaces are there are going to feel so much more relaxed and safe, even in the bigger spaces.
Definitely.
Just knowing those spaces are there.
Definitely.
That's fantastic. Mark, I want to ask you about distributed dining. What is distributed dining? Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I knew. I try to put it into words what this is going to look like for us on the food service piece. And it's like creating an intimate, college-style, student union dining experience, but all the way from kindergarten to the 12th grade. So that, and what's really nice is that this big, massive hall that we feed the children in now, doesn't exist. This is, I don't think this has been done in the country. Pretty
Not
safe to say
not
that.
the same way we're doing it.
Not the
right.
way we're doing it. So there are going to be some challenges in that respect, but for the children, I mean, it's just, they're going to be able to not only learn in the environment, but they'll be able to stay there and then also eat in that intimate environment. And
So-
that's pretty cool.
So it becomes more their home space.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do in home spaces is when we're at home, we're learning at home and we're eating at home and we're comfortable at home and we're resting at home. And
Right.
so you feel really safe there. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll get that, especially for the younger kids, they'll get that experience in their room instead of getting moved to large halls. And
Correct.
that's fantastic.
I think it's
that-
important to share. Sorry, Mark, if you
Yeah.
want to finish your thought.
Well, I was
go ahead.
but that's where the challenge for us will lie is, because we'll have a centralized kitchen, but we'll have to distribute and take food to these different, and we're calling them pods, but I think we're going to
Small learning communities.
Smaller little
Yeah.
communities where we have service centers or service lines where we can distribute the food. So we're going to have to transport that and still maintain the quality that our food service is starting to grow and be known for. So that'll be the big challenge.
I
for
can
us.
see that that'll create some on the inside. The things that the students won't see is how are you going to get everything to the right spaces.
Right.
But from the student's perspective, and I like that you said communities, creating small communities inside the larger school setting
Right.
so that they know they have their space they belong in.
Correct.
That's fantastic.
That was the piece I was going to share. Is these are by design, they're very large buildings. They're going to be some of the largest buildings in Southwest Ohio. That was done in response to our sense of responsibility to be as efficient as possible, to be as cost effective as possible. But as a child, you're in this massive building, especially a young child, you don't want to feel like you're lost in the mix. You want to have your own community. So one of the major design strategies we leveraged was making these small learning communities, which are about 125 to 150 kids. There's research around that says that's about networking. That's about the breadth of a network that most people can interact with in a meaningful way. So you've got a small learning community where the kids don't really have to go very far to get almost everything that they need. And distributed dining was a big piece of that.
And that actually really answers a question that I had about consolidating younger grades into a larger building. And I thought, wow, that's great for resources, but also how does that work for the kids? And that really answers that. You're going to create small communities that each kid will know they're a member of. And that keeps it from being overwhelming, even to the
Right.
little kids.
Right.
And really the older kids, almost more need to be members of a community to
Right.
know that they have their community.
Right.
Well, I think even within those smaller spaces, there's just a variety of types of spaces. So there's going to be collaboration spaces, there's going to be social spaces, and with all the different spaces that will accommodate different size groups, I think the key is that those spaces are designed around function. You know, what do we need them for, rather than the buildings of old, which were just classrooms, and they were roughly about the same size, the same space. There was no difference between how they were designed in terms of size and/or even furniture, for that matter.
The old models were based on the factory approach. It was the industrial age. They were a function of double-loaded corridors and everything being as efficient and uniform as possible, and it's adult-directed, like she had mentioned earlier. Well, we don't live in the industrial era anymore. We're in the information age. We're in the digital age.
Right.
And the buildings have to respond differently in order to empower the kids.
And that's a really good point because we're still copying designs. There are still new schools being built in various
Right.
places that say, but that's what a school's supposed to look like.
Exactly.
You really said, let's not think about what we think a school should look like.
Right.
Let's go back and see what the spaces need to do
Right.
and make those spaces.
Well, we've reimagined teaching and learning. So how can you reimagine teaching and learning and not think about the space?
Right.
You know, what does that space look like if the teaching and the learning is different?
Absolutely.
Right.
So let me ask, before we finish, I want to know from any of you, what about the new facilities is the most unique and innovative thing that you're excited to see happen?
My perspective
Go
is
ahead. Yes.
just the openness of it. just the ability to make it how you want to. So Dr. Ragland and Mr. Denny stated that you can have a large collaborative space, or you can downsize it to 50 students to 25 students. And with my population, students with disabilities, we do have the smaller push into a smaller area where we can focus on those individualized students and then welcome them into the larger community. And then the distributive dining is just fascinating to me. It brings my mind to the Starbucks, you know, having that feel of the Starbucks cafe where you can have an intimate conversation and still work on projects and have conversations.
Correct.
So, you know, I think the whole project is just something that's going to be amazing. And, you know, our employees that are coming to the district and students who are coming into the district are coming in at a great time with PBL, with New Tech Network. I mean, we have so many innovative things that are happening, and the building is designed for all of those things, including students with disabilities. It's just amazing.
For me, I'm most excited about the learning stair. I want to see how teachers use that learning stair, and so it would be part of that open collaborative space. You know, the typical hallway that you would walk down is not going to be the typical hallway or staircase anymore. It's all redesigned, and so we're trying to maximize our space and use it all, even that in the hallway with the learning stair.
So tell me, and it's difficult without visuals, I know, tell me a little bit about the learning stair and how that's different from a hallway.
So they're out in the hallway, and it's a huge stair, but it's very wide. And so it's basically, I don't know if you could imagine an amphitheater outside, but just a section of it inside. So it's a rows, and so they're tiered, and so you can see everyone that's down at the bottom standing on the floor, and so students can use that, or teachers can use that space in order to do presentations of any kind, musical performances, classroom presentations.
My mind is already thinking of all kinds of visits. That's exciting. So even the hallway is not wasted space.
It serves as the anchor or sort of focal point for each small learning community.
Oh, that's exciting.
So, and it's got ample power because that's important. It's also an overflow area for distributed dining. So this idea that you can eat in the spaces that you learn and vice versa, that the space is flexible.
That's fantastic.
It's very similar to what we envision ourselves doing as adults. We're just sort of translating that to the students.
I'm seeing this in so many of these elements, is that it's less of let's set up some sort of block thing that you'll never do in real life, and let's make it more natural the way that we learn and the way that we live. So that's going to be so exciting for the students, for the parents that are sending their kids, knowing that this is the experience that their students are getting. That I'm just really looking forward to seeing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For all of you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the Warrior Supercast podcast, and we've been catching up on some of the elements of the new buildings that are being constructed in the Winton Woods City School District. I want to remind everyone to keep an eye on the district's website, www.wintonwoods.org. You will find the latest events happening in the district. You will also find construction updates there on their homepage. You can find out whatever's going on. You can see pictures in progress. So go ahead and take a look at that site if you feel like you need to know more after listening to this. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.